Hi, folks. Welcome to Monday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast. We didn't make Sunday because some of us were a bit under the weather. I think we really have to start with the panel-based poll that gave us a 54% support for indy. There's been a bit of a spat on Twitter over the Plan B. We also maybe should look at why is the Scottish Government pumping money in to the press, the Deadwood press, over this period. And list parties, and that is parties who support independence who intend only to stand on the list. Good thing, bad thing. I'm sure we've all got views on that. So, well, let's kick off with a panel-based poll. Stuart, your thoughts on that?
Yes, of course. The first thing to say is we were at 54% in 2016. However, as you pointed out before we started recording, and we're all possibly aware that it has been this is a steady, slow climb to 54%. So it looks fairly permanent. Although on the other hand, of course, we got the background of the total incompetence of the Johnson government. So if we weren't sitting at 54%, you'd be asking why. I'm not sure about it. There's a lot more detail than that headline to be had, especially if you go to Wings most days. He's drip feeding all kinds of little gems, including the fact that apparently SNP supporters are they've got Stockholm syndrome. They're supporting the Scottish government giving money to their opponents, the people that run the newspapers, but we'll come to that later.
I thought it was quite interesting. There was, what's his face, Angus Robertson published a breakdown of that panel-based one as well, and women between the ages of 34 and 51 were kind of the least likely to vote for independence, which is an interesting one given women of that age were quite strong supporters in the past. So it's good to get a breakdown, but I think sometimes the polling companies and the analysts get a wee bit too anal about the whole thing. I think it's a decent number. I think it should be better, and it's also tempered with the fact that, I mean, in England, for example, the Tories are still ahead in every poll, even in the middle of this pandemic when they've handled it appallingly badly. They're still in front.
That kind of brings me back to remember, guys, we're the political anoraks. How many people really pay attention to anything? But the headline.
I think the headline number is important, and like Stuart said, it has been a steady, solid increase that looks as though it could very well be permanent or close to permanent. So if and when IndyRef 2 kicks off, we're starting from a very, very positive spot. And there's only one side that can fight a positive campaign. So it's nice to see that the water dripping on the rock is making some slow progress.
Well, you've got to look at the big picture. I'd forgotten about it myself until I came across some archive material. It's now 13 years since a government has taken power in Scotland in favour of independence. And we're sitting with 54% for independence. We're looking at anything up. There are moves inside the Labour Party in Scotland to force the people running it to change their policy on independence or to possibly split the party. It is, I suppose, it's a positive time to be considering it.
I think you're right, Stuart. I think there's people do tend to forget that. You know, it's the same with these, and we'll talk later about the list parties, but it's the same with the supporters of that. They complain about the electoral system in Scotland, but under the system that we're complaining about, the SNP have won the last 3 elections, and they've made a bloody good fist of running the country, having won those elections.
I think that's one of the problems the SNP has is being in government. It has to be even-handed, has to be very managerial, has to get it right.
Yeah, it's difficult to be radical when you're running the country.
Exactly. And You know, while each year that goes by reinforces the idea that an independent Scotland, and in brackets underlined and red ink, with the SNP in charge, could be a very successful country. And that's your problem. I think there's a lot of people sitting there going, yeah, but if it isn't Nicola Sturgeon in charge, what's it going to look like?
I think maybe you're right. I think the solid managerial way that the country's been run over the last few years is probably winning over some of these soft nos, you know. But I still think we've got to be delighted that 45% that voted yes in 2014 is rock solid. It's absolutely rock solid. It's never even looked like wavering. So it's a great place to start for a second campaign.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I'm interested that the don't knows are so low now. What is it, 7%? I think it is.
Mm-hmm. Aye. Well, I think, let's be honest, mate, it's as much as the Conservatives accuse the SNP talking about independence all the time. Invariably, it's the other way around. They're the ones that have kept it top of the agenda this last few years. And they don't have a serious argument to say that we couldn't do well, because you're looking at it's a cluster burach down there. There's one mistake after another, one U-turn after another, and this is for a government that's just won an election, has an 80-seat majority, and it looks like even with that 80-seat majority, Boris is going to be forced to have another U-turn this week on Sunday shop opening, because there's too many traditionalist Tory MPs that have told him they don't want shops open on Sundays.
I'm not sure the 80-seat majority is a good thing for an incompetent government. It means that you have to think hard.
Look, I think there is a new danger that might be just approaching, and it struck me listening to today's briefing. Benny Higgins seems to be a new name to me, but he's reported today on the economic prospects and the plan to recover Scotland after this virus. He was asked about, I think in two questions, about finding the money to boost the Scottish economy. He said that Germany had decided on what, 105 billion euros.
4% of GDP.
4% of GDP was going to have to be spent on boosting the economy coming out of the virus. And the equivalent in Scotland would be 4 and something percent.
4%, 6 billion in monetary.
Sorry, 6 billion. Now the question arises, and also there's also a question of, he answered questions about what about money needed in the very near future, and he was talking about possibly getting the Westminster Whitehall, or the Treasury to be specific, to allow them to convert capital funds that are sitting there unused because of the virus into revenue, so they could rescue some businesses in the immediate future. There is, of course, a danger. The more fiscal powers that the Scottish government gets, the bigger the risk for one way or another. If we think back to when we were first considering financial powers, for example, you end up with income tax, which is a bit of a poison chalice if you can't borrow money and if you can't tax business properly, etc.
Well, where you have to start from is the point of who has the power. They're not going to give fiscal autonomy or more fiscal powers to the Scottish government, because it would give the Scottish government the opportunity to get things right. And they don't want them to get things right. They want them to follow the Westminster line.
Aye, they want divergence.
Yeah, and the money is what dictates that. There is no way they're going to give the Scottish government the power to borrow £6 million, £6 billion. They're just not going to do it, because they need that control. They need to be able to, for want of a better way of looking at it, they need to be able to throttle the Scottish government or give them a wee bit gasp of air. They want that control.
And that wee gas comes in the form of handing more and more money to the UK government in Scotland, the Scottish office, to spend into through their arm rather than through the Scottish government.
And that's the way they'll do it. They'll do it so that they can put on Facebook and Twitter little ads that say the UK government has done this for you.
And make it sound as though they're handing us the money and it's the broad shoulders that are helping us out, when we all know that any money spent by the UK government in Scotland is raised by the UK government in Scotland, because we more than pay our fair share.
The Scottish government starts having to say, look, we're not happy about paying X amount of interest every year to you for money you spend on our behalf that doesn't do the job it's meant to do. They need to get to that position, and that's not going to be easy, because it's a complicated message to sell. And the Westminster government know that. They're getting nothing. It's that blunt. They're getting nothing. Quite apart from anything else, the Westminster government, the Treasury, want to control the money so that the biggest benefit goes to England.
Yeah, aye. I noticed that they're starting to fly kites about austerity and cuts and tax raises, which isn't the language that they were putting out up till a couple of weeks ago.
Well, we've got the worst pension in Europe, and they're going to do away with the triple lock. That'll happen. Our Chancellor has announced the possibility.
Yeah.
So they're pushing the boat out. They've got 4 years left in government. They don't care what their pensioner base thinks, because they've got 80 seats.
Well, that's the thing, mate. They can only really get rid of the triple lock and kind of that this year, basically, because you've got local government elections and what have you coming up next year and that. So if they're going to screw the pensioners, they're going to have to do it this year. And I think you're right. I think the fact that he's talking about it now means it will be policy in the next couple of months.
Well,
politically, they're going to hammer the pensioners, so they've got something to give them back.
Now is the only time to do it. With with 4.5 years to another election, they can abandon us oldies.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got to say, it's brave for the Tories to abandon pensioners, but it's bloody brutal given the support that they've had from the pensioners over the last 3 elections. Basically, it's been the Blue Rinse Brigade that have voted them in.
If you can be bought, you can be sold, Jimmy. Ask the DUP about that.
Aye, very true.
You know, I mean, the only people that would do well out of this are people who are doing well anyway. There's nothing sure than that. Tory, well, Tory.
That's the thing, mate. It's beginning to look more and more like they're going to repeat the mistakes that they made in 2010. Well, they didn't see it as mistakes, do they? Because their friends profited hugely out of that.
Exactly. So, Plan B. A couple of SNP stalwarts have been at each other's throats, only they haven't been at each other's throats about it.
We've got Chris McElhenney, who's the leader. He's described as a rebel. That annoys me. It's in the National. The National's taking close to the SNP leadership line on this issue again. Seems to be very close to the SNP these days, the National. The story, as I see it, is that Chris McElhenney has actually put forward a motion, a proposed motion for the next meeting, SNP meeting, whether it's virtual or in real life, but it's probably going to be virtual. Pete Wishart just blindly challenged him to come up with some detail of what it would be, what the plan B would be like, and Chris McElhenney said, "Well, it's all there in the motion," and they both agreed, "Well, this will decide the issue."
What is it?
Well, don't ask me to go into the detail of it. It was all a bit vague as far as I could see.
Okay,
that's why they could agree on it. They could both agree.
Is it the Plan B that says? Effectively, the SNP should have in their manifesto a promise for a referendum if they get majority at Holyrood. Is that the one?
Oh,
it kind of is.
It kind of is.
It's written in typical political party language. It reminds me far more of the Labour Party than the SNP, but the SNP, of course, has a huge former Labour Party membership nowadays.
Jimmy, your thoughts on this?
Start with a teacup, mate. I tend to disagree with Pete Wishart on most things. I reckon that I know that people call him a stalwart, but I reckon he's indicative of a certain level of SNP member who will tell people, we've been fighting for independence for 3 decades before you arrived on the scene, so you've got to listen to us. And I do like to remind those people,
really good at
fighting for it and no got it.
Really good at fighting, not so good at winning.
Exactly. And I just think we've had a full parliamentary term. We've had a full Scottish parliamentary term where we've not moved on independence at all. And we're still sitting there asking for permission to ask the people of Scotland what they want, and being told, regardless of 54% in the opinion polls, we're being told that the people of Scotland didn't even want to think about independence, and we've just to get back in our box. It's outrageous.
I think it's worth pointing out that Pete Wishart did express a rather controversial comparison. He said we'd end up in the hellish mess that Catalonia's in.
Aye, that's just
this is the fear.
Idiocy.
This is the fear that Europe won't touch us with a barge pole because it's not considered a legitimate referendum to give us independence. I'm sorry, that I don't buy that one. It's written into the Spanish Constitution that nobody can secede from Spain, and Catalonia is under that constitution. It's not written into our constitution because we don't have one. We have a treaty that creates our union. Whole different ballgame.
Treaties can be set aside at any time.
Whole different ballgame. So I don't consider that a sound argument.
I worry about us even exceeding the ground that we need international recognition. We've got international recognition by Article 1 of the United Nations, that we are a people, we are a nation, and we are absolutely entitled to determine our own future, regardless of what treaties were signed 300 years ago.
Unfortunately, that falls down to decisions in courts, and that's one of the problems.
There is another aspect which I don't think we've actually discussed, not for a long time. It's the international perception. Scotland is almost unique in aspirant colonial nations. It is highly recognized, partly because of the football situation, but also because of its culture and its bagpipes and all the things that the tartan thing.
Well, and the fact we were part of the colonial brigade.
Well, but it has a clear identity, certainly in an awful lot of places in the world that other aspirant nations don't have.
I think also the fabulous worldwide coverage of 2014. It's still in people's memory that we had a referendum before, and that it finished up with quite a close result. And I'm pretty sure all around the world, because all around the world doesn't get the tainted unionist BBC view, they get their own view from their own journalists. I'm pretty sure that all around the world, it would be said, this is a question that will be asked again at some point.
And at the time, it was regarded internationally as a gold standard way to run a referendum, because it.
Yeah, and in retrospect, was that such a good thing? I don't know. Which brings us quite neatly onto Jimmy's bugbear of the day.
Yeah, list
independents supporting list parties.
Well, I've kind of followed a couple of them, and I'm forever asking questions of them. I do, just because I'm a contrary wee shit, but also because I'm not necessarily certain that this is a clever idea. What we're basically saying is that after years and years of complaining about how undemocratic the first past the post electoral system was, we are now saying that we want an undemocratic, unrepresentative result from a proportional system. These people that want to put list MSPs in are basically saying that the party that finishes second in our election shouldn't have the second number of seats. I didn't quite understand. I think we're handing possibly a huge amount of ammunition. If we go down this route of gaming the system to get an extra 20 independent supporting MSPs into our parliament, great, we didn't have to listen to Murdo Fraser or Annie Wells anymore. But basically, by gaming the system, we're handing Westminster the opportunity to see that that election result is illegitimate. And given how rabid this Tory party is, they might just turn around and say, you know what, Nicola Sturgeon, you're no longer First Minister. This holiday is no longer open. We're closing it.
Well, the system we invented to game the system isn't working for us, so we're going to shut the Parliament.
Aye, well, see, Norrie, I do have, I think that's a slight misnomer, and everybody in Scotland just blithely pumps that out there. It's not the best system, the D'Hondt system, but it's far more proportional than any other system that is in operation in the UK for anything at the moment. It's no great, but it works, and it does give us a proportional result. I worry why people want to silence Labour and Tory voters.
I don't disagree with you.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is an argument that says, I support independence, I want the SNP to be in power, right? But I don't agree with everything that they stand for. Therefore, I'm going to use my second vote for another independence party that's nearer to what I believe. In other words, I want to utilize my opportunity for democracy more fully.
See, I worry. Sorry, Stuart, on you go.
I was going to ask you, Jimmy, have this new party, have they published a manifesto yet?
As yet, none of them have either published a manifesto or a list of candidates, mate. The ISP, Independence for Scotland Party, they've got a website that you can go and visit. It's basically encouraging people to join and give them a bit of cash, if I'm honest, mate. But one at front and centre of their website is Scotland is effectively a one-party state, which is a ludicrous thing for any political party standing for election to write, as far as I'm concerned.
Especially when the Scottish government has lost a couple of votes in the not too distant past.
So are we suspicious of the people organising this list vote party, possibly their plans?
I am to an extent, mate, yeah. I do worry that it's the old, the unionist divide and conquer. You know, that's number one in their playbook. But I'm also, as I say, I'm suspicious of the fact that people claim to be Democrats, but they hate the result of democratic elections. I hate Murdo Fraser, you guys know that, and I would cheerfully stomp on Annie Wells, but to say that these people should be removed from Parliament because their party finished second in an election, it's a bit odd to me.
But surely the more parties there are, the wider your choice, the better the democracy.
You would think so, mate, but as I say, we'll see. I'm intrigued to know how they think they're going to get the 7 or 8% of the vote that they're going to need on the list votes to actually make any difference.
I hope whoever they've got crunching the numbers for them knows what they're doing. Because the danger of this is if they do stand, as has been said, they split the SNP vote on the list and open the door to more.
Look, can I ask, Jimmy, are they attracting more people from the left?
Not really. It seems to be across the board, Stuart. It seems to be that they're attracting, I don't know what to call them, Zoomers, but they're attracting the ones who desperately want the SNP to do anything to get us towards independence now. But they're also attracting people who, for example, aren't keen or they're not keen on things like the Gender Recognition Act and the Hate Speech Act. They're getting people who are so indie-minded but feel that the SNP is going down the wrong path or has policies that aren't for them, which is fine. But as I say, I worry about the whole premise that basically what they're looking for is 80% of the seats in the next Parliament from about 54 or 55% of the vote. I think that's wrong. I like the idea of proportional parliament. I hate Tories, but they should have a voice because they finished second in the last election, and they'll probably finish second in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I can see both sides of this argument.
It's an interesting one, mate. It will be interesting to see when they publish manifestos and when we get a list of who the candidates are, because I think that could be crucial as to, there could very well be a few of the usual suspects lurking in the background that haven't, you know what I mean, they're keeping their powder dry and just pop up prior to an election. Well, let's be honest, Cat Boyd, for example, is desperately been quoted almost everywhere trying to get her face about in that. So I think she's looking for a job back in Holyrood.
I do think at the moment, I mean, I've looked at this fairly closely. At the moment, until I see a manifesto, and that includes the SNP manifesto, I have to say, until I see the manifestos, I'll keep my powder dry on this one.
I was wondering, given that the last, it turned out to be, they were left wing, but the last alternative party to surface and make a bit of a splash was Rise. I mean, they managed to attract 1,000 people to an opening rally in Glasgow, you know, indoors in a hotel. So, I mean, unless this new group can do something like that, they're probably dead in the water.
But and even then, mate, Rise, they had a few good characters, they had a few interesting sojourns into policy debates and that. But come the election, the numbers of votes they got was derisory. They made no difference whatsoever. They weren't even close to getting list representation.
So the best thing that Rise ever did was go into the housing estates during the referendum. And they were crucial. Their organisation on the ground apparently was fantastic. But, you know, okay, let's move on, because this debate will not go away. It'll get louder the nearer we get to the Holyrood elections. Some complaints from people about the Scottish government buying advertising in the mainstream media and thereby supporting them through the pandemic. Our feelings on this? Stuart?
Yes. I questioned it when I saw it, when this was announced. It was about a month ago, maybe more, 6 weeks ago when they announced. In fact, it might even be 2 months ago when they announced that they were going to be paying for the, basically, when they announced it, it sounded as though they were trying to do two things. They were trying to support the Deadwood press through the crisis, because people aren't buying newspapers, even fewer than they have been. And at the same time, they needed to get information out of clearly, their messaging correct and into the ears of people and the eyes of people that wouldn't necessarily just get the government policy about this crisis. But what's interesting is that Wings did one of his detailed polls on this subject, and he discovered that there's serious Stockholm syndrome in the SNP support, because they have all the support for the government Scottish government handing this money to the Deadwood press. The biggest support was from SNP supporters.
It's an interesting one. I think we know that the press are the enemy of the indie-minded in Scotland. Press are almost uniformly unionist, just because of their ownership and the makeup of their staffing. But I think that they needed to get the message out there, and there are people of a certain age who only get their information from BBC, STV, and their morning paper. So I didn't have a major problem with that. I think there's also the thing that in a democracy, we do still need a press, even if the press are against you, even if the press are against what we want for Scotland.
It'd be nice to have a balanced press.
They will be horrendous come the next election campaign, mate. They will be uniformly against us and what we want. But you still kind of need a free press, don't you?
Well, there's an opportunity here, Norrie, for us to maybe make a small difference. We'll see. It struck. Let me read what I've written. I haven't published this yet. I'm just working on something. There's a flood of misleading English COVID crisis guidance flowing over the border on television into Scotland. All these channels that aren't BBC One and STV. It's confusing and dangerous for the vulnerable people who don't pick up what the instructions are straight away. I think we should make a complaint to Scottish Ofcom to step up and sort this out.
Scottish Ofcom.
It's not a political issue. It's about this. It's a public health issue.
Wait a minute. Have we got a Scottish Ofcom?
You've been there yourself. You and I have been to their office. St Vincent Street in Glasgow, remember?
I didn't realise. I thought it was Ofcom in Scotland.
And they've got a Scottish representative.
Well, that's what I mean. It's Ofcom in Scotland.
Oh yeah, I mean it's
not a Scottish Ofcom.
Yeah, but we could complain to Ofcom in St Vincent Street in Scotland and publicise that fact on the basis that it's dangerous to the vulnerable people in Scotland.
Well, we could, I suppose, but they would ignore us like Ofcom always ignore people who've got a decent complaint. Can I make a point about the advertising? Let's be a little bit more Machiavellian about this. If the Deadwood Press are losing the advertising revenue they need to keep going, and that gap is filled by the Scottish government, would a situation arise, as it does with the BBC at the moment, I believe, that the Deadwood Press would suddenly have to become a little bit kinder to the Scottish government, their biggest source of revenue. As I say, the BBC seem to have taken a very pro-government. Okay, be kind to them. We won't call it pro-government. We'll say they're less critical than one would expect of the Westminster government. Could the present Scottish government be looking to influence the headlines here?
Well, for start with, Norrie, you're being far too kind to the BBC. They're in the pockets of the Conservative Party. They have been for 2010. And the situation in Scotland, as you know, the placemen and women in Scotland on health boards and in particular broadcasting and the press are mostly of Labour Party stalwarts.
Or spouses or relations.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder if what they're trying to do is make an enemy into a neutral as opposed to a friend, I think.
You mean threat to remove the fund, the money?
Well, it wouldn't be a threat. I mean, there needs to be a reason for it.
Well, the bottom line with this whole campaign is that it was money that had to be spent, and it had to be spent in that area. Yeah. It was UK government. It was consequential for UK government spending in adverts in the Sun and the Express. So it was always going to be spent in that area. So they kind of had to make the best of it, really, didn't they?
I agree with you, Jimmy. I mean, this brings me back to the should we subsidise Virgin Air? Yes, we should subsidise the employees of Virgin Air. We should not subsidise Branson.
Right.
You know, I mean, they pay tax, the employees pay tax like everybody else. The fact their boss doesn't make their jobs of less value to the economy or to them as individuals. The same thing applies to the press. If the most effective way to get your information out there is to pay the press to put it into their papers, that's what you should do.
It will be interesting to see when Boris makes his announcement on switching to 1 metre social distancing this week. It'll be interesting to see, one, if Nicola Sturgeon wants to maintain 2 metres for any length of time longer, because that could actually be quite problematic, I think. And two, there'll be another feeding frenzy with the Tory party and their friends at BBC. Because let's be honest, when Jackson Carlaw has something to say, it's usually because somebody for the Express or the Telegraph phoned them up and told them what they're going to be running in the morning. So he needs to get tweeting about it in the previous evening so that he looks on time and on spec. So we know that the Express, the Mail, the Telegraph will all go one way and back Boris at 1 metre. I wonder if any other press will be brave enough to say, you know what, if Nicola Sturgeon chooses to make a different decision for Scotland, that is entirely her right.
Well, she was very strong, if you noticed at today's presser, announced, detailing the fact that she's not accountable to London on the coronavirus. She's accountable to Holyrood and to the people of Scotland, and she laid it out again and again. And she also brought up the situation that you have a possible second wave in China, Germany, and South Korea. She didn't say there was a second wave. We didn't get much detail about this economic report that was announced today. I'm sure we'll hear more about it tomorrow, but I know that John Swinney, who's in charge of education, he's going to take questions in Holyrood tomorrow. So we should see a bit of movement on the schools. And possibly, she did say, she give a date for the decision on bars? Or was that on the...
She refused to give a date.
She gave a date. She gave a date on something.
I've got a sneaky feeling that you're going to see movement on schools when it comes to the 2 metres and not see movement on bars and places of entertainment. I actually think that her argument is going to be, right, there's only single figures of cases being reported now. We'll move to 1 metre to get schools back. Unfortunately, we don't want another sudden spike, so your pubs and clubs are not going to get to move to 1 metre.
Well, looking at Germany, looking at some of the scenes there, I'm not so sure. You know, if we had a spike like they've had in Germany in certain places, these folk are getting selective quarantined into the blocks that they live in. You know what I mean? They had 100 2 people tested positive in a tower block, and a couple of days later there were 100 people in that tower block positive. They're dubbed up in that tower block, mate. That's effectively their quarantine for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean,
if that kind of thing happened in Scotland, and let's be honest, if it's going to happen anywhere in Scotland, it's going to happen through the West, because they're the ones where the numbers are the worst, and that's where everybody's going to protest every bloody couple of days. Can you imagine if they tried to dub up a Scottish tower block with Police Scotland? They'd be getting bloody cookers fired at the windows and everything at them, mate.
That reminds me.
Actually, Jimmy, do you know, I'm not sure you're right.
You think?
I'm not sure you're right. I mean, there'll be the odd nutter, no doubt about it. But I actually think if it's done properly, you know, if people are getting food delivered and the odd carry out, you know, I mean, I would make it government policy that everybody gets 2 cans of lager that's dubbed up.
That's just cruel if you're somebody like me. That's just a starter. But a main course.
So you know what I mean?
You just reminded me, Jimmy, when I lived in the high-rise up in Wrestlerig, the one thing you never did was park close to the building.
Aye, I know what you mean, mate. I've seen a couple.
You never knew when something was going to come out the window, you know, a telly or anything heavy. You imagine the mess that would make of your bonnet.
But I think that's what we're probably looking at, is similar outbreaks like her happening in Germany. Because let's be honest, the German numbers were good, but it doesn't take a lot for this virus to get a hold again. And I think...
Which is the other thing I think she's delaying for. I think she's waiting until she's confident that the test and trace will be able to get these spikes.
And think about it. Today they're talking about isolating, quarantining the whole of Anglesey because of the...
Why? Because they're Welsh.
Because they can. It's an island, and they've got a bad outbreak there. Yeah, well, some of the outbreaks in meat processing factories and that's a bit worrying, because that's something we've seen China, America, Germany, here.
Yeah.
And they didn't seem to have any particular reasoning for why that's happening in meat processing, but it certainly seems to be happening all over the planet.
The German guy, the German senior guy who was on Sky this morning, and he was saying it's not about what they're doing with the meat. It's not the meat that's moving it around. It's they have to work so close together. I
Aye,
don't
just
know
the
why
fact that they work so very close together in that
to
environment.
do the
aye.
job. And meat
I'm
packing.
sorry. I'm sorry. I've worked in a slaughterhouse. I've worked on a cutting line.
Aye.
You all have to work close together.
Well, I
It's
don't
all
think.
done. The beef's hung on a chain.
Yeah, no, but I don't think it's in the slaughterhouse, Nori. I think it's the second stage where it's turned into
Packing.
sausages and cuts and you know, shrink wrapped, and it's at that level. I think that's
Right.
Can you imagine if you could catch COVID for a steak bake? People would go absolutely apoplectic. Can I get my steak bake or my pie?
Well, one of the theories is it's something to do with the temperature. Because these
they're
places
cold
are
and they're cold and humid, and that's apparently what the virus likes. That's spraying water all the time, apparently.
Yeah,
I like that in my women.
it's always,
Cold and humid.
it's always damp and it's always cold.
Aye, I like that in my women. Mm-hmm.
You know. Well, the cold bit.
Aye, cold and a bit distant, mate. That works for me.
It sounds as you should be clammy.
We are going to have to start calling this the misogynist men's group.
I told you we need to have a celebration of the Grumpy Old Men show.
I'm a feminist at heart, mate. I just don't evince in quite the way that I should.
But you tried hard then to me.
Aye, I tried to spit something out there, mate. The brain was in neutral.
Okay, guys, that's coming up for the half hour. Anybody got anything funny? I'll tell you, did anybody see the I think what was it? I think it must have been on Twitter, the Dad's Day, dads catching small children. That was if you come across it, watch it. It's kids coming off bikes and being caught at the last minute by dad and dropping out of boats and being caught by one leg.
All right. There's a laddie in Edinburgh, Joshua Grant could be his name, who's made a record called Edinburgh, and it's #1 in the streaming charts. So I can recommend everybody go and have a look at that if you're in Edinburgh.
Okay.
It's a very good video.
Right. Okay, I'll go with that. I'll try to find it.
It's a very good video.
You should have sent me a link. We could have played out with it. Too late now.
You didn't want to do that, mate. You're a Letha. Didn't give these Edinburgh buggers any more publicity than they deserve.
Aye, well, once Scotland gets its independence, it's Leith next, brothers. Leith next.
Mm-hmm. People's Republic of Leith, yeah, bass.
And we also discovered that Leith is the most pro-European place in Britain.
That's because it's full of foreigners. In fact,
easy there, Nigel.
There's none of us are Leithers. You're a New Havener, you know, Jimmy.
No, I'm a buggery, mate. I was born in the Eastern General, but puts Leith on my birth certificate.
Right. Well, the bad news is my wife might have delivered you.
Oh, the problem she could have caused just with a wee hand over the face for 30 seconds, eh?
A wee squeeze of the head.
It's held you upside down in that bucket they keep for the purpose under the bed.
I can breathe through my ears, mate. The bucket wouldn't have been no use.
No advertising, Jimmy. No advertising. Right, guys. Thanks very much. Stuart Lockhead, Jimmy Hutton. I'm Norris Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks. And I hope we weren't too grumpy old manish for you. But we'll catch you all tomorrow. Cheers for now.